Football at 4. Johnny Mac, how's your golf game? You any good?
No. I can.
No.
I play about twice a year, so that should tell you.
Yeah, me too.
I'm a little inconsistent.
Yes.
To say the least.
Yeah. I'm a little inconsistent
when I hit
myself.
When I hit it well,
yes,
it was a long way.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat you are then. I play about 2 to 3 times a year, but I play about, like yesterday, the 4 holes I played at a very high level.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say that. And my short game is atrocious.
Terrible.
But when I drive it well, it feels good.
Yeah. The last couple of football at 4s, we've been kind of going through positional groups, and I want to continue that trend. Yesterday we looked at the corners, so I want to go to their counterpart and talk a little bit about the Eagles wide receivers as we get to minicamp on Friday here. I want to get your take on, we got Alshon, Nelson Aguilar, Deshaun Jackson. Is that the 3 that will get the most reps and the most catches this year?
Yes, as we stand right now, if nothing is done with Nelson Aguilar, and I still think there's potential there.
Okay.
Because
let's stop right there. Then. If Nelson Aguilar is not here, who benefits the most? Who's the next guy that would benefit from his loss, him not being here?
Well, I would think from a traffic standpoint, it would be Deshaun Jackson. I think you've moved Deshaun more into the slot, at least at times. And look, for that to happen, I think there's got to be a number of sort of reverbs. And you know, I mentioned Braxton Miller yesterday when we were talking about potential surprise people making this roster. And that's a guy Doug Peterson mentioned a while ago at the league meetings. And, you know, he would project to be a slot receiver. We saw Greg Ward, who is back in the AAF. He's a slot guy. So I think for the Eagles to be comfortable, they would have to find a new slot receiver, because I don't think J.J. Arcega-Whiteside projects to the slot at all. I think he's a traditional outside receiver with his length and his body, ability to body the football. I don't think you want him in the slot. So it's going to be difficult to find somebody to potentially replace Nelson Aguilar. So I do ultimately think he's going to be here. I think he's going to be the slot receiver. And if that's the case and you're talking about traffic, yeah, it's going to be Alshon. It's going to be Nelson Aguilar, probably number 2, and then Deshaun Jackson at number 3.
All right. What about Mac Hollins' role now going into his 3rd year? He was a guy that, hey, he's a big play guy. Maybe you can throw him some deep threat, be a deep threat, throw him some deep balls. We haven't seen much of anything in him, not even on special teams for that matter.
Yeah, I mentioned that me and Mike Kay from NJ.com were going back and forth, and I mentioned that Mac came in with a reputation of a special teams player, but it hasn't really developed. And Shelton Gibson has really taken over that role as being the outside guy on punt coverage, and that's important. If you're talking about the last wide receiver, I think people don't understand that. And they just say, well, he's this, if you're keeping 6, this guy's the 6th best receiver. Well, if you're the 6th guy at a position on a 53-man roster, you got to help on special teams. And right now, Shelton Gibson has the advantage on special teams when it comes to Mac Hollins, even though the reputation was the opposite when they came in as rookies. Mac has been a disappointment, and he's not, let's be honest, he's not even in the mix at receiver now that Arcega-Whiteside is here.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about Alshon Jeffrey, the type of receiver he is, the type of receiver Arcega-Whiteside is. Well, that's Mac Hollins. So he's your 3rd guy as far as being a long, lengthy receiver. He's got to help on special teams or he's not going to be on this football team.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned Shelton Gibson. I mean, he's been around for a couple of years now. I mean, he had that one play that we all kind of remember. What was it, against the Giants or the Redskins or somebody? He caught that ball, and then, it was in a year that they were really struggling to have a deep threat. But it appears that they just don't view him as a wideout in the offense, right?
No, they don't, and that's what I said. At this stage, I don't even expect Shelton to help as a receiver. If you get down to him, it's because there's significant injuries. But what he has done is become a very good special teams player.
Right.
When it comes to coverage, he's one of the Eagles' best players. And that's important because when you start whittling down to 53 men, and as I said, and you're talking about the sixth receiver, you're going to keep the guy Dave Phipp is banging the table for. And that's been Shelton in the past. And if it continues to be Shelton, he'll make this football team again, even though people look at him and say, well, he can't help you as a receiver. That's not his role. His role is to help you on special teams coverage, and he's done a very, very good job of it.
Yeah, and then, there's a lot of interesting, like you brought up Braxton Miller, who was the quarterback at Ohio State. Greg Ward was a quarterback as well. So these guys are athletes. And then there's Charles Johnson, who was in the AAF, but, has had a decent run in the NFL. I mean, it seems that, and then Arcega Whiteside, who, of course, they drafted pretty high, it seems that they have some intriguing options to at least be able to pick up the phone on Nelson Aguilar. But all those guys would seemingly be a significant drop-off, right? So, I mean, does it make sense at this point, or is that when we get Dallas Goedert's name into the conversation?
Well, yeah. I mean, to me, it's evidence that Doug Peterson wants to play with three wide receivers, wants to play with 11 personnel. And you see the Eagles trying to get in the receivers so he can do that. On the other hand, I think if you look at it as getting the best football players on the field, I think you can make a strong argument that Dallas Goedert is better than the Eagles' third receiver, which would be Nelson Aguilar. Other people might look at that differently, but a lot of people believe they should be playing more 12 personnel. A lot of people will tell you the Eagles were more effective when they used their Tiger personnel and used two tight ends last season. It's clearly not what Doug wants to do. It's clearly not what he's most comfortable with.
Right.
But at some point, you got to say, if he's the better player, you got to get him on the field. I don't see that happening, though. I think the three receivers are going to be the base personnel grouping on this offense, and I think Nelson's going to be that slot guy. Even at that $9.4 million number, which is too much.
Yeah.
But it is what it is as a fifth-year option.
Now, if they have Alshon, Nelson, and Deshaun, those are three guys who do three different things. Is this the most firepower offensively that Carson Wentz would have at that position?
Yeah, I mean, as a whole, even if you add in the tight ends, we just was
right. Now that's not even counting Ertz and the upgrade
and the running backs and the upgrade at running back as well. Yeah, no question. I mean, on paper, this is a really, really talented group, and I think if everybody projects as the Eagles think they are going to, I think the bigger question for Doug Peterson is what we kind of just alluded to with that discussion of 11 personnel versus 12. There's only one football. How do you make everybody happy? How do you get people on the field? How do you get them involved? It's going to be an issue for him. It's a nice issue to have. It's a good problem to have. You'd prefer to have that problem than have nobody who can make plays. But it can become an issue because guys are going to want the football. And it's going to be tough to get everybody involved. It really is. There's a lot of good players on this team.
Yeah, no, and the one thing is Deshaun gives them the deep threat. Nelson has been very good when he has been in the slot role, and Alshon gives you that kind of – I mean, so they have three guys who do different things as opposed to what they had last year. I mean, Golden Tate, very talented, but filled a similar role to Nelson Aguilar, and they never really had that outside guy. So it's almost like they're better at two spots now.
Yeah, there was no question there was a redundancy to the games of Nelson and Golden Tate, even though the Eagles didn't like to admit it, and you probably did downgrade two positions because you had Nelson playing out of position, and you weren't taking full advantage of Golden Tate because you were trying to make Nelson happy. It's much better this year. There is no redundancy. Everybody has a clearly defined role, and it fits better. You don't get to those redundancies until you get to somebody like J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, who's not going to be able to get much playing time as a rookie, barring injuries, because he's got a redundancy to Alshon Jeffrey, at least not at the level. Obviously, Alshon's a very proven player, but just from his traits and his skill set, it's going to be difficult to get him time with Alshon Jeffrey. So for the starters, it's a much better sort of chemistry, and that projects well as the talent we talked about. Not only is the talent there, but it fits, and that wasn't necessarily the case last season, as you mentioned.
Let's go, Matt Collins, Charles Johnson, Shelton Gibson, Braxton Miller, Greg Ward, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. He's making the team 1, 2, 3, 4. How many receivers typically will make a team? And it looks like we already got 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4 are definitely making the team, right? So how many typically make it? This is going to be an interesting mini camp.
5 or 6, yeah. It kind of depends on how you want to rotate the other positions. Tight end, running back fits into it as well. I think there's 3 clear players at tight end the Eagles are going to keep, and Ertz, Goddard, and also Richard Rodgers. But they like Josh Perkins as well, so that could play into it. And then you have the running backs. How many running backs are you going to keep? And that could be a little bit murkier because of deeper down the depth chart there. They have a lot of bodies. So it's going to be 5 or 6. If it's really knocked down to 5, then you're talking about Matt Collins versus Shelton Gibson, what I talked about versus special teams. If you're going to keep 6, you'd keep both of them. I know a lot of people were excited by Charles Johnson because of what he was able to do in the AAF. He was arguably the best receiver in that league, but he's a guy who can't help you on special teams. So essentially, he's got to be the 4th receiver, and he's not going to be the 4th receiver because you just used the 2nd round pick on J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. So as you mentioned, he's making this football team. So it's going to be really difficult for Charles Johnson at this stage. And then you mentioned those slot guys. That's where Miller and Greg Ward would fit in, and that's probably not going to be in the equation for them unless the Eagles do something with Nelson Aguilar, and that's becoming less and less likely as the days pass.
Yeah, that will be interesting. I don't know, in this mini camp this weekend, is this just strictly rookies, or is this guys who are, trying to make the team as well?
It's rookies and first-year players who don't have a full year, which would be 6 games of NFL tenure. So guys like Joe Osman, who we talked about yesterday, I wrote about on 973ESPN.com. He was on the practice squad. He can participate, but it's rookies and guys like that. So it's no veterans or anything. That starts later in the OTA process, May 21st, I believe. But it's just rookies and first-year players.
So you're not going to see, in other words, like you're not going to have like Charles Johnson who, hey, I want to be out there because I want to show him. He's not there. The Matt Collinses, the Greg Wards, these guys who, have very little NFL experience but have been in the league, they're not at this.
No, Charles is over 30. I mean,
right? No, he's been around.
A number. Yeah, he's been in the NFL for years, so not him. Matt's interesting because he did not play, and there's a rehab element to it, so he might be given permission to participate because he missed all of that season. But again, for the veteran, the established players, they're not allowed to participate in this particular camp.
Yeah, and then. obviously in this camp, which starts on Friday. So we'll have some details on guys like Miles Sanders, Clayton Thorson, and J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. Those guys, when you get to see the skill position players get out there, it at least gives you a little, because you can always kind of look at them next to, or compare them to guys before them. And I think everybody's going to be keeping certainly will keep an eye on Miles Sanders, right? He'll be kind of the guy that everybody is wondering about.
Yeah, I think so, because he's the rookie, even though obviously Andre Dillard's the first-round pick, and JJ's a second-round pick as well as Miles, but he's the one who's got a clear path to playing time. And it's almost expected that he'll be the complementary back to Jordan Howard. And hopefully, if he shows even more than that, maybe as the year goes on, he could get more and more playing time. So he's the one guy you can look at and say he should get some significant playing time. And that makes his ramp-up period, to be honest, probably a little bit more important than even Andre Dillard's,
right? Because
Andre's going to be the swing tackle. JJ is going to be a backup receiver. The Eagles are counting on Miles Sanders to be involved. So it makes it more important for him.
So Matt Collins, Charles Johnson, Shelton Gibson, Braxton Miller, Greg Ward. There's a couple other guys who are less notable. Is there a favorite for you out of that group?
Well, I think out of the lesser receivers, if you're talking about who's going to make the team, I do think it comes down to if you're only keeping 5, it'll come down to Mac or Shelton. If you're keeping 6, they both have a leg up, because let's be honest, Howie Roseman has shown that he's going to defer to his draft choices if it comes down to that. But I do think if you look at the other receivers, as I mentioned a couple of times, I think there is some, at least, you notice it when the coach, and I've mentioned it with Howie Roseman on the other side of the football with Joe Osman, if the head coach, who's an offensive-minded coach, is bringing up Braxton Miller, and he's not asked about him, I think you should make a note of that.
Yeah.
I think it says something. I think it says he's excited about him, and he's at least got an opportunity to open some eyes, and with a good off season, perhaps he can make a run at a roster spot.
Yeah. By the way, John McMullen at JF McMullen. You can check out our McMullen Daily Conversations on the website, 973ESPN.com, and our YouTube channel. About 30,000 views on our conversation. Think about that. 30,000 people wanted to hear you and I talk football in May.
It's amazing, isn't it?
And it's funny. I
looked at the teams in the playoffs.
Yeah, I looked at the analytics to see, okay, 30,000 people. Are they just clicking on it and then getting out? No, the average time listening is 15 minutes. I'm like, man, people really want to know about the Eagles' second and 8th wide receiver.
No, I think it's you and me, Mike. I don't think it's the Eagles. I think, hey, you know what? I try to make myself feel good. So we have some big names on this station, as you know, but we beat them all, you and me, buddy.
That's right. That's absolutely right. Yes, it is. Generally, it is the number one most listened to podcast each day. Is this one right here that you're listening to live right now, but we podcast it up on our YouTube channel, and now it is up on our website, the McMullen Daily Conversation. But we've been toying around with the idea of just doing our own podcast and just talking about anything, like the XFL may not test for marijuana.
Yeah,
sounds like a Shander topic.
Yeah, well, he'd be excited. I think he applied to the XFL.
Right.
But it's interesting because when the introductory press conference for the new XFL 2020, he said that nobody would be allowed to play in the league who got arrested. So he made a big deal about the personal conduct off the field, even though I think that is overblown with the NFL. Very small amount percentage-wise get in trouble. But he made a big deal of that. Obviously, it doesn't include marijuana, which it's interesting. But anybody who watches wrestling knows Vince can contradict himself pretty quickly.
But it's so odd that this tweet just came in. I don't know if you saw this, but this gentleman just tweeted, "Fact, I have not missed a single podcast of John McMullen on 97.3 since the Eagles' 2017 offseason. He's listened to every one."
So he's the one.
Yeah, that's like
Give him a T-shirt.
That is a Cal Ripken Iron Man streak right there.
That is an Iron Man streak.
Holy mackerel!
Not even a cold like Joel. He shows up every day.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, this guy doesn't have gas, nothing. He's in there. That's an unbelievable tweet we just got there. All right, John McMullen, football at 4. We do it every day. We talk football, and we enjoy it. It's right here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. What happens tomorrow night to the Sixers? I know they lost by 36 last night, so the sky is falling in.
Well, I mean, I think the problem is you don't know what you're getting from Joel.
Right.
I think if you get good Joel, I think they got a very good opportunity to force a Game 7. But if it's anywhere near what we saw the past 2 games, they're done. So it's kind of
I mean, have you ever? No. The answer is no. There's not been a more bizarre. I mean, last year the poor guy's playing with a welding mask on, and this year he's got gas and respiratory infections. I mean, you can't make this stuff up.
Yeah.
You're in the playoffs twice. You break your face. Your teammate runs into you and breaks your orbital bone, and now you're sick.
And that kind of thing, I don't think you can, obviously, when you break an orbital bone, you can't blame that. I've mentioned that with Carson Wentz. Injuries are injuries. You can't legislate them. Some of the other things, it makes you question, not to the degree, people get sick, that happens, but got to fight through it a little bit better. And you look at some of the other stars in this league, and you're seeing on the other side arguably the number 1 star. That's why, despite the talent, nobody questions Joel's talent. You can't put him in that conversation.
No.
The Toronto Raptors know what they're getting from Kawhi Leonard tomorrow. They know. Now, the Sixers might be able to overcome it, but the consistency is there.
Yeah.
Sixers don't know what they're getting. That's the difference between those 2 players.
Yep. And the funny part is there were people last year questioning whether or not you could count on Kawhi Leonard, all because of what happened in San Antonio last year. But it's evident that there was something wrong with him last year, I think.
Yeah, I mean, this year he looks like an automatron. He looks like a well-run machine.
I said yesterday these guys were screaming at me, and they were looking at me like the emoji head upside down. I said I thought the Raptors were the better team, and I think they're going to the Eastern Conference Finals. I've said that to the NBA Finals. I've said that all year. These guys are looking like I'm a nut because I think the Raptors are better than the Sixers. Here's the thing: the Raptors won 58 games, and Kawhi missed 22 games. How many games would they won if he played? What do you win? 72 games if he plays all of them? That's a good team.
I picked him to win the series in 5 or 6.
I had 6.
So arguably the Sixers even got farther than I thought. So from that perspective, but when you're in the moment, you look at it a little bit differently. And when they took the lead and they had a chance to sort of seize control at home, it becomes disappointing. And I think that's fair.
No doubt. That Game 4 was that was the whole that thing was. But guess what? If you're the better team, you win that game.
Yeah, I agree.
This guy texted in.
That to me was more disappointing than the blowout.
Yeah,
that because it was on the home floor. You had a chance. You had them down, and you let them up. You let them up off the canvas.
This guy texted in. I haven't missed John's segments since 2016.
Oh. Here we go.
All right, we'll talk tomorrow.
All right, thanks, Mike.
You got it.